the latest dose of Bipolar Recorder. This podcast may cause dizziness and blurred vision. Enjoy.
Hey y'all, this is Hunter Keegan. You probably know me from the flourishing underground mental health activist mission known as Bipolar Recorder Project. I want to start by wishing every single member of the Bipolar Recorder global community a blessed, healthy, and safe holiday season. It is currently December 4th, 2025 at the time of this recording. Whether you're a listener of the podcast, a member of our X Spaces peer support chats, a reader of my written work, a familiar face from my university presentations, or otherwise following me right now for any other reason, I am endlessly grateful to still be at the helm of Bipolar Recorder after all these years. Thank you. We have major plans for 2026, plans that will continue bringing the project to new levels. Some of the big tickets on the list include more on-site, real-world mental health outreach presentations in spring 2026, as well, of course, as the production and release of the much-requested official Happy Valley's A Bipolar Journey audiobook, which I would love to get out by next summer. And we have other things we're brainstorming right now as well, including online mental health advocacy workshops that we would like to put together and start hosting next fall. So those are just some starting points for what we would like to do next year. And it's really exciting stuff. We can't do it without your support. So as the scope of Bipolar Recorder Project continues to expand, I want to offer new ways for fans, friends, followers to support financially. The operating costs continue to rise, from studio equipment to web hosting fees to travel and lodging and everything in between. So I mentioned those things because we really couldn't do this without you, and your support is so deeply appreciated. Therefore, from now until January 2nd, 2026, we are running a special promotion at bipolarrecorder.com/shop. We're calling it the Goodbye 25 Funding Drive. There is brand new merch for 2026 available for pre-order. There is also select classic merch in stock available for discounted rates. Be sure to browse through the Bipolar Recorder shop page on our website to see what we have to offer. That's at bipolarrecorder.com/shop. We have a lot of very cool new merch designs that I designed myself using Photoshop. The motifs were inspired by important topics frequently covered on the podcast and on our Twitter and X support spaces. So, for example, we have a bold new Mug Club coffee appreciation sticker, as well as a vibrant Hydrate or Die sticker to remind us to always drink water. There are other fun miscellaneous references as well that people who have been following Bipolar Recorder for a long time will probably appreciate. And typically, I don't offer international shipping for physical merch, but because this is a special limited time fundraiser, again, live until January 2nd, 2026, if you are an international friend of the show, please reach out to me at hunterhkeegan@gmail.com or over social media, and we might be able to work something out. I've had some folks in the United Kingdom order merch successfully. I do it on a case-by-case basis, just relative to however complicated the specific international shipping location is. So if you are an international friend of the show and you would like to support and get some merch, again, feel free to reach out to me directly and we might be able to set something up. That's hunterhkeegan@gmail.com. Last time we did a fundraiser, we had tried doing it through the Kickstarter platform. That was back in July of this year, and my ultimate impression of the Kickstarter campaign was that the Kickstarter platform has some technical issues that hindered the amount of funding that we were able to acquire during that 1-month fundraising drive. So basically, that fundraising campaign didn't work out. It got some strong support, but there were some glitches on the Kickstarter platform. For example, it wasn't displaying the campaign description properly for like the first week and a half that the campaign was live. I just got really frustrated with it, and this time around, I decided to organize a fundraiser completely in-house, completely through bipolarrecorder.com, so people can directly support. I think it mutually works out better for me and for followers and supporters of the show when we do it in that format. And this concludes my plug for the Bipolar Recorder Project Goodbye 25 funding drive. Again, check it out, bipolarrecorder.com/shop. And now, as we segue into the core of today's podcast installment, I wanted to give you a preview of what you're about to hear. So I wanted to share today some excerpts from an interview that I recently recorded with a new guest. His name is Andrew Smith. He actually prefers to go by the nickname Smitty, which is pretty cool. And before I roll the audio, I just wanted to give you a heads up that this interview played out a lot differently than I was expecting when I went into it. So before I say anything else, let me emphasize that nothing I'm about to say is a reflection on the quality of Smitty's interview. I think he did a really good job, and I absolutely appreciate his bravery and boldness in asking to come on the show to talk about his life with bipolar disorder. With that said, there were a couple of key pieces of information I'd like to have known about Smitty prior to the interview that would have helped me better prepare a question outline. And I know this is starting to sound like weird, but here's additional context. So in the early days of Bipolar Recorder, I would typically directly reach out to invite potential guests on the podcast, or potential guests would directly reach out to me through social media or email, and they would ask to come on and participate in an interview. So that is usually how guests ended up getting connected with me during the first couple of years of the show. However, over the last year or so, as Bipolar Recorder has expanded in scope and visibility, I occasionally am contacted not by the prospective guest themselves, but rather by agents or representatives of the guest who are affiliated, for example, with PR firms or whatever, which is fine. However, when Smitty's representative reached out to me a few weeks ago and asked if Smitty could come on the show, I specifically asked if Smitty had any connection to pharmaceutical companies or professional healthcare organizations, and I was told no. So a few minutes into my conversation with Smitty that you're about to listen to, when Smitty offhandedly mentioned that he spent about 25 years working as a pharmaceutical sales representative for some of the largest psychiatric drug manufacturers in the world, I was a little surprised. I have a lot of opinions and critical perspectives on the nature of big pharma and especially psychiatric medication marketing. And we've never had someone on the show before who had a career background extensively working in the pharmaceutical industry. Smitty's background with Big Pharma, combined with his lived experience with bipolar disorder type I, was clearly an incredibly unique angle feel to introduce to the show. We've never had a guest like that on the show before. And when he revealed this about himself, I really, really wanted to explore more about that for the rest of the interview. But this was not the subject matter that we had agreed upon during the conversations between myself and Smitty's representatives, and then with Smitty himself during our little kind of like prep conversation before we actually started the interview. So I was put in kind of a weird ethical dilemma where I wanted to ensure that Smitty had space to share about his life story without me encroaching on the flow of the conversation, while still trying to steer parts of the conversation toward highlighting Smitty's insider knowledge of the pharmaceutical industry. At the very, very end of the interview, Smitty mentions that he strongly believes in expanding coerced psychiatric treatment in the United States, and that topic alone could have been the focus of an entire 1 hour dialogue. But because we were already over our scheduled interview time, I wasn't aware that Smitty was planning on introducing that topic to the conversation. Again, he had ostensibly come on the show to talk about his life experience and recovery, not to debate ethics of involuntary medical treatment or the pharmaceutical industry. And I totally respect that. I understand that. I didn't want to, introduce my own curiosity in a way that would take away from Smitty's opportunity to just talk about his life and recovery. So the show basically just ends on this kind of odd note. And I wanted to throw that out there. I'd be happy to have Smitty back on the show in the future to discuss these specific controversial topics, because I think it could be a really fascinating follow-up conversation. But for what you are about to listen to today, Smitty starts by introducing himself and talking about his diagnosis with bipolar disorder type I, which occurred when he was in his late 30s. He also discusses triggering events that he believes impact his own mood stability. Additionally, he discusses experimenting with different psychiatric medication regimens and finding a cocktail that currently works well for him. He touches on many other aspects of living with serious mental illness too, including the importance of community volunteer work and self-care. Let's go ahead and listen to this conversation, and then after that interview, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Bipolar Recorder, and we'll wrap up. I'm joined this evening by Andrew Smitty Smith, a man living with bipolar disorder type I. Smitty is his preferred name, and Smitty is 59 years old right now, residing in Mississippi. Reached out and wanted to come on the show and talk about his journey. So, Smitty, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to do this. How are you this evening?
I'm doing well. Really well. We have been to get our Christmas tree out of storage and are in the process of assembling that. And I like Hunter said, I'm 59 years old. I'll be 60 in a few days, and have been dealing with bipolar disorder, I guess, close to a little over 20 years.
Okay.
Looking back, past that 20-year, there were times when I was clearly either manic or depressed, but it never rose to the level where I had to seek care until the first break I had. And I was real good at channeling, especially the mania with customers. I sold a medication for bipolar disorder. It's not the one I take now, but I worked for a very large pharmaceutical company, and so it complicated my care because the people who were there to take care of me were customers, and so it was really hard to get objective care for me in
Hmm.
Jackson. So we went to another, it's a smaller town in Mississippi, um, to Hattiesburg. Um, and that's where I went. I think I was inpatient there 3 or 4 times. Um,
Okay. So that's all super interesting stuff to unpack right there. Now uh I wanted to actually talk to you a little bit about what you had done as a career path. And frankly, in terms of like what we were talking about before we started the actual interview, I don't have a
right.
whole lot of background information about
Okay.
you. So I wasn't aware that you had worked for a pharmaceutical company. That's super interesting. So like that, like when you mentioned that, I was like, whoa, hold on a second. So you were diagnosed with bipolar disorder around maybe roughly age 39, based off of what you
Yeah.
said. You had been having symptoms for years leading up to that. Now, where, at what point were you starting to work for a pharmaceutical company?
Uh,
Is
I
that something
started
you had done from like when you were right out of school or what?
right out of grad school.
Okay.
Then that was 1990, in May of 1990. And I worked for a different, very large pharmaceutical manufacturer when I started in the industry.
Okay.
Um, and I was based in a little town in Mississippi. And I would say I was clinically depressed during that time. And I met my wife, and she lived 100 miles west of where I was. And I hadn't built much of a life where I was because I was working all the time.
Hmm.
But um, I we dated long distance for 2 years and got married. Um, and I switched companies. Uh, I went to work with the company I retired from in August of 1998, um, selling a drug called Risperidone that most people with mental illness have
Yeah.
heard of that at least.
I've taken that at certain points. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a really kind of interesting territory in that one of the most eminent thought leaders in schizophrenia research or psychotic disorders research was based here in Jackson at the Jackson, Mississippi VA, Dr. Henry Nasrallah. And so I had that going on. And then at the same time, I also had the very 1,400 bed state psychiatric hospital in my territory. Um, at the time, it was the largest state hospital in the nation. And, with the length of stay, I think when I started, their average length of stay was about around 90 days.
Wow.
And so it was an archaic institution.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I saw firsthand a lot of stuff that I would later experience. Um, and when I did um, have that first break, I was running my territory. That we had an open territory in the district that I was covering for my boss. My boss was on he was already a manager, but he was on a track to do bigger and better things. So he delegated a lot of his stuff to me. And I had a son. My oldest son was in military boarding school and had been there for 6 years. And um, I trusted the staff implicitly, explicitly with him. I always supported them, but I found out um, that he was being hazed through one of the other staff members, and pretty severely hazed.
Mm.
And that's what really kind of tripped things into mania for me. And that first break.
Okay, I
Um,
just want to make sure I'm understanding. So you said that you, and let me just kind of like recap what you just said. Now you said you had been working as what exactly was your role at the pharmaceutical company? Were you doing like
Um,
sales,
yeah,
research,
I,
like
I was a sales rep.
okay, so pharmaceutical sales representative out of grad school, have been doing that in Mississippi for a number of years throughout the 1990s. And then you said that, so you must have probably been mid late 20s when you started doing that type of
Yeah,
work, roughly
25.
25. Okay. And so from there, you had been doing that for about 10, 15 years. You had a son who was then in a psychiatric hospital.
No, he wasn't in a psychiatric hospital. He was
Okay.
in a military boarding school.
A military boarding school. Oh,
Yeah,
I see. I see. I see. Okay. I see. That's what was throwing me off, and that's the part that I wanted to make sure I was understanding.
yeah,
So your son was at a military boarding school, and he was being hazed at the boarding school,
right.
and so this must have been you were late 30s at the time,
Yeah,
and then at that point that was like the triggering thing that
yeah.
really maybe. So what happened next? Thank you for filling me in and kind of like
Oh, no
bringing me
problem.
back to the full circle of everything.
Yeah, it was the fall of that year, which would be like 20 years ago. So what would that be? Not let's see, 20. No, it wasn't 2020. It was like 2004 or somewhere around in there. And it was around Thanksgiving, and my family has a farm that we meet at for holidays and special occasions, and we were, that the holiday pressure was going on. I had all this work pressure going on, and then I find out that he's being hazed by people I've trusted for 6 years, and um, so I I just stopped working one day, called my boss, and said, "Look, I've got some family stuff I've got to deal with. The company was real big about your family and taking care of that, and I'm going to be out for a couple of days."
Mm,
Well, the boarding school it was about an hour and a half from where I live,
hmm.
and so I drove down there and got him. And oddly, he wanted to go back when the dust settled, and he did, and that was his senior year. And but with me, um, it flipped me into, well, I went to one of the people. It was so hard to get care because I knew everybody so well. And but I did
Okay.
go to one of my customers and tell him what was going on, and he prescribed an antidepressant, which flipped me into mania.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I quit sleeping, and um, wasn't taking care of myself very well. And we had gone up to our farm to take some people hunting. I don't hunt, but lots of people here in Mississippi do.
Hmm.
And I I decompensated on the way to the farm, and so my mother and my wife turned around, and we went back to my parents' home, which is about 100 miles north of here, and went to the ER in their little town.
Hmm.
And I knew the ER doctor, and he was on the phone with a psychiatrist who told him what to do. And then they weren't really equipped to deal with, bipolar disorder, especially one I was pretty psychotic too.
Yeah.
Um,
So what brought it to a point where you have family members being like, "Oh, whoa, we need to take Smitty to the hospital and have the doctors talk to him." Like, what was happening that was that alarming?
Yeah, the thing I remember is I would get just fixed on an idea or a thought, and I couldn't shake it. And I and then I would spin all these ideas and stuff, and then just shut up and not speak
Mm,
for minutes, for 10 minutes or 15 minutes,
hmm.
even though somebody was questioning me or asking me questions. Um, I was very kinetic. I moved a lot, um, and paced a lot. Uh, Before we went to the hospital, actually, we went back to my parents' house, and the doctor had called in some medicine for me to try to get me calmed down, and it did a little bit, but I mean, she prescribed enough to where it would put me to sleep. It was Xanax, and
Mm-hmm.
and I would sleep for about 2 hours, but then I would be up and
Yeah.
bouncing off the walls again. And so for some reason it was November, in the middle of the night. I decided to leave my parents' house and nothing but a pair of boxers, no
Mm-hmm.
shoes, no socks. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was really cold for here. It was really cold. And so they had to call 911, and they came with the ambulance, and um, I had to go. They took me to the ER there in Grenada, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they, like I said, they weren't equipped to deal with, our staff to deal with a patient with serious mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't have the ability to do that. So they transferred me to UMC, University of Mississippi Medical Center, where I knew everybody. And luckily, the doctor that I approached when I felt something was wrong, she, um, let's see, she was adamant that I be taken care of, that my hospitalization needed to happen outside of Jackson, Mississippi, because I knew everybody and it
Yeah.
could impact my business. And so she did, and was successful. And I responded real quickly to treatment. I was put on the psychiatric intensive care unit. Um, it was a bad place to be. You didn't
Mm-hmm.
want that. And I never had to have restraints or anything like that. I
Mm-hmm.
did have to be put in isolation a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, it, inpatient hospitalization for psychiatric patient is just um, it's demeaning. It's
Mm-hmm.
and they I don't think anybody in the equation meant for it to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
It just was, um, and there were I was on the same wing of the hospital with criminals and
Mm-hmm.
people that were way gone past what you could do with medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, like I said, I did respond really quickly, and they moved me over to the regular unit. And I was there for about a week,
Mm-hmm.
and then I took maybe 2 or 3 months off from work,
Okay.
and things started coming together. But keep in mind, I'm doing business with all of these psychiatrists, and I'm still
Mm-hmm.
symptomatic,
Yeah.
and they know something's wrong, and it was more depressive after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we I did the best I could, and
Yeah.
I had a
Totally.
partner. We had partners that also worked for the company selling the same products, and they were really good to me, and they really helped me through a rough time. And um, they were good at me. They were really good to me, and they were good at holding me accountable and doing it gently.
Yeah.
Um, because I had been the one that was calling the shots before
Mm-hmm.
that, with as to what was done in our territory that we shared. And um, then I was okay for 7 years. Nothing really
Mm-hmm.
happened. My son graduated from military school and was appointed to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point,
Mm-hmm.
and he was doing well. My other son was 7 years younger, and he was doing well. Uh, I can't remember one seminal event that flipped me into mania the second time and the third time and the fourth time.
Right. So going back to that first event from the 90s, that first Thanksgiving uh debacle or crisis or
Yeah,
whatever you
yeah,
want to call it. Um, I mean, so you had been in a psychiatric hospital for a bit. You said you had had to take a couple of months off from work after that, but like, I mean, you said that there was a lot of almost like tension after you got back because you felt as though you were still symptomatic, and the doctors could tell that, the
yeah,
doctors who you worked with in a professional capacity.
yeah.
Like, what was that like? Can you elaborate on that some more?
A few of them asked me directly if I was okay, but the
Really?
majority of them asked the people that I was partners that also worked with the company. They were partners of mine.
Okay.
They asked them a lot more pointedly and a lot more with a lot more concern. I was real flat when I got out of the hospital.
Yeah.
Affect was flat.
Well, yeah, because they just put you on a bunch of affect flattening medication.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's crazy. So like, what do you know if there's anything like, why do you think the doctors felt you were still symptomatic, or like, why did you feel as though you were still symptomatic too?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What do you
Um,
think was tipping them off that you had had a manic episode and that you might
uh,
still be feeling some of the effects of that?
uh, Probably pressured speech.
Yeah.
Um, I was a sales rep, so I was used to talking fast.
Hmm.
Um, but not being able to articulate ideas because my thoughts were going so fast. They Most of them commented on just how that I looked depressed
Mm.
based on my affect,
Hmm.
and I probably was, and
Yeah.
um, I was going to kind of the psychiatrist that the psychiatrists go to in Jackson, Mississippi, and he he took me off of the Risperidone and put me on Abilify,
Mm.
and also the generic name is dualoxetine, and I can't remember. It's an antidepressant, and it's got a dual mechanism of action. I can't
Hmm.
remember exactly which one it is.
Okay.
Um, and that helped a lot with the affect.
Okay.
Um, I was more myself.
Okay.
Um, I'm a pretty outgoing person, but very ebullient personality. I I didn't have any trouble being in large crowds and quote
Yeah.
unquote work in a room. But that had all kind of gone away, and now it was back. And it, what I was doing for a living, uh, people don't understand how horribly stressful that job is.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Sales is hard
yeah,
in the best of times.
yeah, it is, and it there are lots of demands that are placed on your time, and there's not enough time for one person to get everything done. Um, but the pay's great,
Yeah.
so people put up with
Yeah.
it. And anyhow, um, the I can't remember what was going on the second time I was hospitalized, or really the last time I was depressed
Hmm.
and suicidal.
Hmm.
And my wife had broken her ankle, and I was up at night taking care of her, and up during the day, um, just trying to work as best I could, and it got to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm and I'm talking about the last time I was hospitalized now. Um, and I got super depressed and realized I needed to say something when I started thinking about suicide,
Mm-hmm.
and couldn't shake the thoughts. And so, you know, um, I was in the hospital for about 3 or 4 days, then responded great to drugs, but I knew I couldn't go back. Um, I wasn't ready to go back into that pressure cooker. And there was a new drug coming on the market. Um, it's esketamine or Spravato.
The ketamine
It's a
nasal.
ketamine derived product.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had tried ketamine infusions and they work great,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't afford to have them
Yeah.
once a week.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and it puts you down for a whole day.
Yeah.
And I couldn't take that much time off from work. And um, I did take Spravato for a while. I wasn't able to continue it. I had a good response because they're very strict with the procedure for giving Spravato,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to have it administered in a doctor's office, and you can't leave for 2 hours, and you can't drive. You have to have you prove that you have a ride home, and so I really couldn't continue that, and um, then uh, I got really depressed again and had to make a decision about my profession,
Mm-hmm.
and decided to go on and retire at 54.
Okay.
Wasn't ready to retire, but I had to. I couldn't deal with the amount of stress that I had.
Yeah. So regarding, and first off, thank you for sharing all of that and taking us through, the first episode, being a manic one, last episode, really intense depression, suicidal depression. And I'm glad that you were able to find a treatment plan that worked for you and that has helped you. I'm really curious to know more about your perspective on your direct experience with psychiatric care as someone who was a pharmaceutical representative, helping sell psychiatric medications to people. Did you like, because I'm curious, and so I'll say a lot of people see and I'll just say this: a lot of people see the logo of Bipolar Recorder Project, and they assume that
Yeah,
this is like an anti-psychiatry show, or that I have because it's the skull and the
yeah,
RX and all of that, and so I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know what quote unquote the anti-psychiatry movement was when I started doing Bipolar Recorder, over 4 years ago now.
yeah,
I was completely naive to all of that. So I'm just throwing that out there to say that I don't have an agenda. I'm not trying to get you to trash big pharma or anything, but
yeah.
I'm just really curious, so you must have had very specialized knowledge about some of these medications that probably 99% of people wouldn't have had,
Oh
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so what was your like reaction maybe that first time when you were in the ER and they're telling you, well, we need to, get you on an antipsychotic, a mood stabilizer, this, that, and the other, uh, what were you thinking? Were you like, oh, well, I understand these medications and these should help me, or were you like, oh, I don't know, I know a little too much about these,
Yeah. Well, when I was at university, at that first break um, that I had, they tried to put me on Risperidone. I don't even remember this, and I was, telling everyone how wonderful Risperidone was, and they were trying to put me on it, and I wouldn't take it. I said because it I said gave an excuse that it would cause tardive dyskinesia. And some they all have the potential to do that.
Right.
But I refused the Risperidone, so they put me on Zyprexa, and that worked. And but when I got down to Pine Grove, for some reason they switched me over to Risperidone again, and I agreed to take it down there. And that's what I was discharged on. And I don't think I had a mood stabilizer at that point other than the Risperidone. I was trying to think what else. I was on some antipsychotic.
Okay.
I mean, antidepressant. I want to say it was Wellbutrin.
Yeah.
And a very, I guess, not as much medication as I'm on now. Let's say that. I had some side effects. I gained a lot of weight on Zyprexa, and my psychiatrist and I kind of accepted it as, because we tried all the other antipsychotics too, and we kept coming back to Zyprexa, and it has been really the only thing that has stabilized my mood for any significant period of time. Let's see, in July of 2022, I was on Zyprexa, Wellbutrin, another antidepressant, and some other stuff.
And would you say that these medications have been helpful for you? And at this point, you've been able to find a cocktail that is suitable for your individual life and needs and all that. Okay.
The main thing that happened was my doctor put me on, which has Zyprexa in it, but it also has another drug that short circuits the hunger mechanism. And so since July the 9th of 2022, I've lost a little over 130 pounds.
130 pounds, you said?
Yeah.
Wow. So that is wild. Congratulations.
Thanks.
And what can you tell us a little bit about that journey as well? I mean, has that been through medication, exercise, diet, lifestyle, like all of it?
Yeah, I've struggled with my weight off and on for most of my life. And one of the diet programs that I tried at one of the hospitals here in town, they had a registered dietitian that left and started her own clinic, and she's very motivating, very positive, and she's also a certified diabetes educator. And she was able to basically take apart the way that I ate, which is I just ate everything, and teach me again about portion size, how much to eat of what. My psychiatrist was on board. He switched me to, because he knew I was trying to lose weight and I wanted to stay psychiatrically stable. And so has Zyprexa in it, and that was 3 years ago. I haven't been to the hospital yet.
Not yet? Did you just say, I haven't been to the hospital yet?
Yeah. So far, I haven't.
Sorry, I find that's so funny to me. Come on. Maybe you won't ever.
Yeah, I hope not. The main thing that has prevented that is my doctor is incredible. He spends an hour with his patient on each visit.
Your psychiatrist does? Wow, that's really unusual. For most psychiatrists spend less than 10 minutes these days. Yeah.
And it's just, you talk. And I see a therapist too.
Yeah.
And anyhow, my wife has my psychiatrist's number, and if things start going in the wrong direction, or I start not sleeping, and you know, thoughts are racing, and she can tell through conversation. She'll call my doctor, and you know, he if I send him a text or call him, he'll put me kind of in line, but
Mm.
you know, to get to down the line. But if my wife calls him, typically he's going to pick the phone up and
Yeah, like
talk to
this is
her.
a major
Yeah.
emergency. That's really good to have a crisis plan like that in place.
So they pretty much, the two of them are the reason I haven't been in the hospital the last 3 years. I mean, there've been
Wow.
times when I would meet admission criteria,
What
but
like what's still causing that? Like what even though you're on this helpful medication regimen, like is there anything you found that's causing these
typically
symptoms?
I can trace it like to stress,
Yeah.
how much stress I'm under,
Yeah.
um, and um, sometimes honestly, there's really not anything.
Mm.
Um, I, I also have some physical illness challenges. Um, I had to have surgery in August of 2020 for a small bowel obstruction.
Hmm.
And it's a big open midline incision.
Oh.
And I was down for 2 months. And um, I think when I started feeling better, I felt so much better that I kind of got a little manic, and she called my doctor.
Mm.
And typically, he just tells me to take two of everything for a couple of days and see how it goes. And uh, it it's kept me out of the hospital so far. That and I haven't been gainfully employed for 5.5 years.
Okay. And you said you had retired. Are you trying to stay retired or are you looking for work right now or what?
Um, I'm looking for something. I'm actually considering starting something on my own.
Okay.
One of my interests is photography,
Okay.
and so I've got all this photography gear, and I looked around and found this. It's like a course on real estate photography. You just go in and
Yeah.
shoot photos of people's
Cool.
houses.
Hmm.
So the agent can list them on their, with MLS or
Yeah, yeah.
what's the Zillow or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So that's a lot different than pharmaceutical sales, but probably a little bit less stressful, I would hope.
I think the thing is I have more control over my schedule,
Yeah.
and I'll have the ability to, because it's not unlike what you and I are doing. There's a post production
Yep.
process you have to go through too,
There sure is.
and so but I'll farm all that out and to editors. I did take a job briefly selling life insurance,
Really? Okay.
and it was it was as much stress producing as um, selling pharmaceuticals is. It
Yeah.
was extremely, and I just couldn't keep it up. I was living in the computer,
Yeah. I hear
and
you.
I was not sleeping, and um,
Well, you got to do what you got to do, and you have to have professional boundaries for sure. Well, let me ask you, as someone who is a industry insider in the great big world of big pharma, maybe like I'm just trying to think of like where where to go with my next question, but how do you feel about pharmaceutical marketing in terms of the transparency, in terms of if someone sees a commercial on TV for any psychiatric medication, the latest bipolar med, whatever it is, and it's like talk to your doctor about like whatever if I,
yeah.
what's going on with that? Like, are those to be trusted? Like, what?
I mean, I think the advertisements, especially the advertisements that you see in print media and um, television, I think they're very accurate, mainly because um, there's a everything that goes out goes through a very strict compliance
Mm,
um, process where they have experts that look at the the specifics of the job. I mean, not the specifics of the job, the specifics of the
the
promotional
drug.
stuff,
Yeah.
and then there's a different set of rules for um, representative to physician interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably what you're asking more about is that. Um, when I started in 98, well, I started in 90, and we really didn't spend a lot of money entertaining or, having like dinner programs where you have a speaker that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
When I came back in 98, I thought I was spending a lot of money, and I said something about the manager about it. And she's like, "You don't spend you spend less than anyone else on the team."
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, every most weeks, every night, Monday through Thursday, I was out with customers. Um, my partner at the time had a little girl who is the same age as our youngest son. So my wife would babysit while we went out and entertained. And then they cut all that out, which I think is a good thing. Um, I think the industry realized they were going to have to quit doing that, or government was going to get involved, and it would be a lot more draconian as to what they could do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the company I worked for kind of was one of the first to implement some strict uh, compliance rules,
Mm-hmm.
and they got even more strict as they were rolled out.
Compliance rules in terms of like as a representative of this company, like this is these are like the appropriate ways that you can approach medical professionals about the drugs that our company creates, and like
Yeah.
this is what you can do, this is what you should not do, like that sort. Is that what you're referring to by compliance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Like before they did that, I knew reps that would take doctors and their spouse or family to NASCAR events,
Yeah.
um, you know, deep sea fishing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it was just whatever you could think of.
Mm.
Um, and you know, I don't know that I,
And so you're saying that like you think in like 2025, like those sorts of like extravagant kind of like bribery, like
yeah,
toxic, you think that is not common or like not as common or not existent at all even
yeah, it's a good way
compared
to
to
get fired now.
a good way to get fired now in 2025.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Um,
reassuring. I hope that you're right about that. And I don't know. I see all the I see just so I have a degree in psychology. I went to Penn State University,
yeah.
got my bachelor's degree, Bachelor of Science, like, have my lived experience as a individual living with bipolar disorder myself and all of that. And I find myself getting like more and more skeptical anytime I hear about like a new medication or the latest cutting edge thing, because once you start looking into more of the um like efficacy of different medications, like it seems like the results are kind of muddled and like it works for some people, doesn't work for others, and then it can even harm other individuals.
Well, the way the studies are done and designed for antipsychotic medications are they start marketing them based on their efficacy with schizophrenia.
Mm,
Um, it's easy to prove efficacy versus a placebo in schizophrenia
yeah.
if you have a molecule that's active,
Hmm.
um, because it's very drug responsive because the symptoms are so over the top. Um, Bipolar is probably somewhere in the middle. It's more difficult to prove efficacy there, especially on both sides of the disorder, the mania and the depression.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually the second indication that the company will apply for. And this is my opinion.
Okay.
And depression is kind of the last thing that they will go after an indication for, because it is very difficult to prove efficacy in depression because there's a very high placebo response rate. And people, they call it the white coat effect.
Mm-hmm.
Just they're being seen more often by their physician. They're
Okay.
being monitored, and they respond to that more.
Interesting. Okay. Um, all right. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And I also wanted to just touch on a couple of other things I had seen as we kind of wrap up here
Sure.
for the evening. Something that I did know based off of the representative or whoever who had reached out to me, she had mentioned that you believe that volunteering in your community is also a big part of your
Yeah,
recovery.
I
Can you tell
do.
us? Because I strongly agree with that. Like
Yeah,
in 2015, after I got out of the psych hospital, I was like going through like a terrible depression, not unlike yourself. After a manic episode, I got out of the hospital. I was all depressed, like flat affect.
yeah,
And one of the things I started doing was volunteering at a outpatient, ironically, an outpatient mental health clinic in my town. And I would go there like 20 hours a week and help out there. And
yeah,
it actually, like, at the time, I was just doing it because, like, I was like, I just need to do something. I just need to do something and something healthy. And like in retrospect, looking back, 11 years later or whatever, I'm like, I think that was actually like one of the really, really key things that really helped me, like re-energize my life.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So that's my experience with it. Like, what has yours been?
Um, I'm not in the band at church now, but I was for about 10 years.
Okay.
And, that's when you're depressed, just getting out of the house is a win.
Hmm.
And, that's rehearsals for that, and then interaction with other people on the actual day, on Sunday, and, good friends around all of that. And then I volunteered with, well, let me back up. And I think it was 2001, on August the 1st of 2001, my grandmother, she was 92 years old, weighed 78 pounds, and a man broke in her home and murdered her.
Wow.
And that was another thing that kind of tripped me into mania on that first
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah.
And so uh, there's this prison ministry, and people would ask me to staff that, because I could play the piano, and they needed somebody to do that, and I would turn them down because I was just angry at the system and
Hmm.
prisoners. But finally, a really good friend, somebody really close, said, "You need to do this, and you need to do it for yourself."
Hmm.
And so I did.
Hmm.
It's a thing called Kairos, and it's taken from the word chronos, or that in the Greek, that means time. And so what we do is, for 6 or 8 weeks before the actual time, we meet every Thursday night, and then we go into the prison. There's a very big prison that's very close to the state hospital,
Hmm.
here in the Jackson area. And we go there and really just kind of love on prisoners for about, I think it's 3 days.
Really?
And yeah,
Like, what does that consist of? Like, community building, like prison community
yeah,
building events? Like, I don't know.
yeah. It's a part. It's a Christian evangelical tool.
Okay.
I would say. And the guy who's over the Mississippi Department of Corrections now, he was at Angola as the warden, which is infamous in
Yeah.
Louisiana.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to do a true crime podcast.
Oh,
That was
really?
like my first foray into
Yeah,
the medium, and yeah, I'm very familiar. So as soon
yeah,
as you said that, I was like, oh shit, okay. Um,
yeah,
but yeah. So anyway, but I'm sorry, like this story is so interesting though. So you had this like horrific personal loss and tragedy, and it had worked through it and now are going back to prisons to like
yeah,
that must be a really really powerful experience
yeah.
for you.
I was supposed to do one a couple of weeks ago, but we had a wedding that day and I couldn't. And the that and then I, I haven't played for the other organizations that I was playing for in quite a while. But my wife was an elected official in the town that we live in for almost 18 years. And so we were very involved in the community through that
Hmm.
because we got invitations to all the right parties and all the right places and all the right people.
Cool.
And then I was on the board of directors for the county library system where we live, and I was served on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce. Back, we haven't had a chamber in about 5 years now, but that was we both are pretty passionate about serving others.
Yeah.
The most fun I ever had doing that is I went with my youngest son to the Dominican Republic and worked heavy construction in
Hmm.
an orphanage that's about 50 miles off the Haitian border.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that was really cool. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. That sounds like a really really powerful experience. I have to say, I used to consider myself to be someone who like was fairly atheistic when I was 16
Yeah,
and going through that whole thing, but I'm 33 years old now, and I'm not, I don't like follow Christianity or Judaism or Islam or whatever, but like I have to say that like having some sort of like spiritual faith just over the last couple of years in my own life journey, like it's something that has been starting to feel more and more important to me.
yeah,
And the more and more I hear people talk about their experiences with like organized religion, like in Christianity in particular, because lately that's like what people seem to be bringing up with me a
yeah,
lot. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I'm like, I should go to church more often. Like,
yeah.
but
Oh, where are you based?
where am I based?
Where do you live?
I live in Roanoke, Virginia.
Okay, you told me that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the South too. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean we're in the middle of the Bible Belt in Mississippi. And I was raised in church, and I strayed a good bit when I was in college
Yeah.
and grad school, but came back.
Yeah,
So
I had this like when I was that I think maybe that was like part of it for me is when I was a kid, my family we would go to church like maybe a couple of times a year, like on Christmas or whatever. And it just wasn't like a regular part of just our own family units,
yeah,
culture or whatever. Um, but I don't know. I mean, like my parents consider themselves religious. It's just they just don't go to church
yeah.
regularly and all that. And so I'm kind of like I don't know. Maybe I'm getting there myself. Okay, well, anyhow, we've been talking for about 1 hour now.
Okay.
This has been awesome. I wanted to ask you if there's anything else you wanted to touch on before we end the interview. Or
I, I can't really think of anything.
okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure if you had like any words of wisdom or just like
Oh,
anything you
yeah,
wanted to throw
sure.
out.
Sure. the biggest thing I would say is to the medical community, intervene and intervene aggressively before people lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
Do it while people still have stuff left to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about houses and cars and objects. I'm talking about people and families and
mm-hmm.
systems. Don't give up. Just don't give up.
And when you say that medical professionals should intervene early and aggressively or whatever, I can't remember if you used that exact word or not. Like, what do you think that should ideally look like? Like, could you give an example of what you think a good
typically
intervention?
If somebody went in for depression, they're going to come out on an antidepressant and maybe an anxiolytic, like Xanax or something like that. But, especially when you're talking about serious mental illness like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, I was a big advocate for, and still am, for long-acting injectables. Mm-hmm. And if you have to, get a court order to do it. Mm-hmm. And the data is just so robust around that modality. And in the States, it's a sign you're getting sicker. But in other parts of the world, it's the backbone of their system for the SMI population.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I have to say I'm very against court-ordered treatment. Just for me, like, that's my perspective. But I like to have other perspectives on the show as well, especially from people who have lived experience themselves. So I appreciate you sharing that. And thank you for coming on, man. You got any other questions or anything for me about anything?
No, it was a pleasure.
All right. Yeah, likewise. Thanks for coming on. I'm glad we were able to get you on the show, man.
Thanks.
There you have it. Like I said, this interview ends on kind of an unexpectedly weird note, but I think it was still interesting hearing from Smitty and his unique perspective. Smitty did not have any social media or other links to plug, but if he'd like to come back on in the future to discuss more about some of the issues that he raised during this installment, I'd be happy to set something up. The Bipolar Recorder mission wouldn't make any sense without you. I'd just be here in my basement somewhere, ranting into a microphone and sending tweets into the void, spinning the wheels without accomplishing much. But because somewhere, somehow, you've found this independent mental health outreach initiative, I'm able to say that this project has found meaning. Before Bipolar Recorder Project was even a quote-unquote thing, I had written a bit about my life with bipolar disorder, first in a short article published by NAMI in December 2019, and then in my memoir, My Brain is Trying to Kill Me, which came out in June 2020. I had no idea what I was doing at the time. Like, there was no real goal or objective beyond putting my story out there in the off chance that someone stumbled across it and read even a single page. I was genuinely surprised when I started getting emails around early 2021 when people who I'd never met were reaching out to me about how My Brain is Trying to Kill Me had resonated with them and in some cases even inspired them to start sharing their own mental health stories. So around the time that started happening, I very quickly brainstormed a general outline for a podcast. Nothing wild, a pretty mellow, long-form interview format type of deal. And it wasn't my first foray into the medium of podcasting. I had actually hosted a somewhat noteworthy true crime podcast on and off from 2016 through 2020. And that show was called Down Home Fear. It's still available out there if you're looking for it. Anyway, from June through August 2021, I was trying to decide when to formally launch a mental health podcast. I'd learned a lot from my experience with Down Home Fear in terms of audio production. The evolution of sound quality on the Down Home Fear podcast throughout the show's run is actually kind of interesting because at first a lot of the audio mixing is pretty rough in the early releases, and you can almost hear me over the course of the different episodes learning in real time how to properly record spoken word audio. So anyway, that's kind of just a fun little reference point. And Down Home Fear had been a really intriguing hobby to work on in my free time, but that show's subject matter was extremely research heavy and emotionally taxing to consistently create. So while it consisted of a really awesome and engaged following over the years, we had, like 15,000 unique listeners throughout the United States and across the world. And it would get referenced on true crime forums and all of that. I just couldn't keep up with it, and I let it quietly simmer out. So it had kind of an anticlimactic ending to what was actually a very formative era of the Hunter Keegan extended universe, if you will. Part of what I'm saying here is to do a podcast properly is actually a big undertaking, even for really small, relatively basic podcasts like the ones I do. They take a lot of dedicated man hours. And I knew that if I was going to invest that level of time and energy into a new show, I wanted to make sure I was actually creating high quality professional content. And it was also important to me that I had a game plan in mind for where to take my mental health advocacy work next if things developed to new levels. I knew that my mental health podcast wouldn't be as popular or quick to catch on as Down Home Fear because true crime is a super juicy, hot genre on podcast streaming sites, whereas mental health podcasting is more niche, I'll just say. But I still wanted to make sure that it was a professional quality show and that the subject matter and topics covered on the mental health podcast would stand the test of time and hopefully not come across as gimmicky years later. Which brings me to early September 2021, when I received an email from a reader of my work who was based in the United Kingdom. He told me that he'd been reading My Brain is Trying to Kill Me and that he'd been enjoying it and that he found my use of harsh language amusing. I'd received messages like this before, but this one caught my attention because the guy also mentioned to me that he was a working musician who was in a rough situation due to his band breaking up and gigs getting canceled because of the COVID pandemic and so forth. He mentioned feeling too depressed to play guitar, and as a musician myself, I know how upsetting it is to be in the midst of a major depressive episode and being unable to write or play anything, even though that's one of the most key aspects of your self-care that brings you comfort and actualization. Over the next couple of weeks, our correspondence continued, and we mainly talked about guitar gear and strategies for coping with depression. I sent him a couple of albums I'd released with my old band, Last Known Images, and he gave me some nice feedback, and so our conversations continued. And anyway, I won't bore you with all the minutiae, but during one of our exchanges, he mentioned to me that he was interested in podcasting, and I was like, oh, as a matter of fact, I've had something like that on the back burner for a while. And those conversations are what led to me finally taking the leap of faith and launching Bipolar Recorder in October 2021. And as you may have guessed, that reader did indeed end up coming on the podcast, and his name is Stu Alexander, and he was a recurring guest throughout the first few months of the show. Stu dropped out of touch with me for reasons that, I don't really know the specifics of, but in late 2022, he dropped out of touch with me, and, I was kind of concerned, but a couple of years later, thankfully, he reached out privately, and he told me he'd basically just decided to take a break from social media and was focusing on touring with his band, which is called Xander and the Peace Pirates. Very cool little group, and they are like legit, which I didn't know when I first began corresponding with Stu. Xander and the Peace Pirates actually has like a pretty significant global following, and like he does it not like the way I do, where I play music and I put out albums in my free time, but like he does it as his full-time gig, which I thought was like really, really cool. And so I just wanted to share some of that early history of Bipolar Recorder because it's reflective of one of the core aspects of what this mental health mission means to me. It's indicative of what I sometimes call the third element. So that's what we called it in our documentary film, the third element, finding community. And, it's just wild because if no one ever reached out to me about how my brain is trying to kill me, had helped them and inspired them, I wouldn't have known that sharing my story in such intimate, painful detail was worthwhile. I would have been able to feel accomplished in the sense of completing a book about my life, and that would have been it. I would have moved on, probably feeling embarrassed at the concept that I had put myself out there in such a vulnerable way in the first place. As a person, myself, who makes and distributes creative content in attempts to enhance society, I often reflect on a deep fear that I think many other creative types also share, which is kind of a cascading ego death thought loop along the lines of, what if no one gives a shit about this? What if I think this is good, but it's actually terrible? What if I'm a complete fraud? What if people think less of me for creating this? Etc., etc. So when individuals stumble across my various creative works and actually take the time to leave a nice review or write to me, it truly means a lot. And to think that I have a global audience of amazing people following this content, and especially to think that people have been inspired to start mental health advocacy projects of their own after discovering Bipolar Recorder, it's just absolutely incredible. Sharing mental health stories hits differently than other stories do. People seem to resonate with them on a very intense personal level, and that's why all of this is so important, and why, once again, I would like to thank all of you for following Bipolar Recorder. Thank you so much for listening. Bipolar Recorder is on Twitter and Instagram at Bipolar Recorder. My name is Hunter Keegan, and I'm on Twitter at HHKeegan. I can also be reached via email at hunterhkeegan@gmail.com. And again, don't forget about our Goodbye 25 funding drive, available now at bipolarrecorder.com. Discounted and limited edition merch is available until January 2nd, 2026. So don't wait. Check out bipolarrecorder.com today to help support this effort. My name is Hunter Keegan. Have a marvelous day, evening, or night, wherever you are. Bipolar Recorder is a listener-supported show. To help keep the show running, consider checking out our Patreon page or visiting bipolarrecorder.com.
Unless otherwise stated, the hosts and guests on Bipolar Recorder are not licensed mental health professionals. Bipolar Recorder is not a substitute for therapy or professional medical intervention. If you are having a mental health crisis, please contact your local emergency services.